The behavior of the Seattle Storm uh, team, the behavior of the Seattle Storm owner or co-owner or whatever uh, ownership she is. Seattle Storm is a WNBA team, by the way. So just so you guys know, um, her behavior when they played the Indiana Fever was all I needed to know. To tell me about why this uh, the WNBA is keeps stumbling and can't figure out how to get itself together and be professional. This is from the top all the way down to the players. It's not because when people, when I look at videos, about the WNBA, since Caitlin Clark has come in, we keep wondering like, when are they going to stop, these players from coming out here and saying the ridiculous stuff that they're saying? They're making all these crazy accusations about Caitlin Clark's fan base and whatever she brought to the WNBA, and they're always making it seem like she brought so much hate and bigotry, and they're always doing all these theatrics. You know what I'm saying? Out here fighting imaginary racism and this, you know. They need to be out here worried about plenty of other real things going on, but they want to go out here and die on this hill and fight tooth and nail with a fan base that's just way bigger than any of them. I'm just like wondering, like, you know, what kind of ownership would allow this to happen this long? And seeing how this old woman behaved lets me know how this league has been, why it has been the way it has been, because all these people are lunatics from the top. It ain't just these players like Bree Turner, who used to play for the Fever last year, and was out here constantly saying a bunch of nonsense. It's social justice warrior nonsense. It's all these players. They're all um, not all these players. It's a whole lot of these people within the management that's on this type of super. You know, I guess you could call it social justice warrior, or just super annoyingly you know uber liberal type people. They drink Starbucks, and they believe gender's not real, and they believe that uh, you know all the abortion, and all the left leaning things that you could think of. They're all the way left, and you know. Like I said, we thought it was just like some players were just wacky, and they just kind of just let them, do them. But it's like, nah, you see the coaches; they're also saying wacky things. Like the uh, Minnesota Lynx coach, she said some wacky stuff, and then when you look into her life, then you realize, oh, it makes sense. You're also a part of that community, and then this other, you know, person says something. You're like, oh man, like this person that you thought was supposed to be a veteran in this league is just another social justice warrior advocate type person. Another uber liberal. You know what I'm saying? Like another lifestyle pusher. They want to push you this type of rainbow activity lifestyle. You know. This is what a lot of people are saying. This is just what the WNBA has been about. They just want to push these types of agendas. They don't really want to, grow women's basketball. They just want to push agendas, and it's making more sense than ever last night or whenever the Seattle Storm played the Fever. The owners out there, using inappropriate language to teenage girls and telling them to put because they had a post. The two girls had a poster up that was in support of Sophie Cunningham. And so, Sophie Cunningham made some comments that she believed that women's sports belong to women, and it shouldn't be taken over with this trans agenda. They need to keep them out of women's sports and keep women's sports for women. And apparently, these uber liberals, you know, because a lot of them live the rainbow lifestyle, they want to keep it to them, or they want to they don't want to hear any of that type of stuff. They want to go full on with everything. We gotta we gotta you know we gotta believe in trans kids, and they if your kid is telling you they're trans, you should go along with that. And trans people in women's bathrooms, and bathrooms should be non-binary. Saying you could have You can have all this they them pronouns and be all this all this crazy shit that they're trying to make normal. Uh, they want that. They only want people to be spokespersons for that type of talking, and they don't want anyone. Especially I know they don't want players that's in the league, talking another way. But that's what Sophie's done, and so she gained some support from people in Seattle. You know what I'm saying? And some of them showed up to the game, but now they're trying to act like the world is ending. And I guess if you're one of them, yeah, the world is ending for you if you can see that people don't, the main regular people don't support your stuff. You just got like other weird, you know, rich white liberals, and weird black athletes saying that shit. Like, if you just have those groups, that's not going to be enough. Like the average American is not going to support that, and doesn't want to see that in their sports. So then that people aren't going to want to see Sophie get punished, or her fans get you know uh, scolded for supporting what she said. They're going to be like, they're going to want to go harder at them, the WNBA. And this is a bad look for the WNBA. They probably don't get it, because they live in their little bubble where they think this is everyone around them, supports this behavior. But the average person is not in support of this type of stuff. They don't want to hear this type of rhetoric, and they're just not. I think they've done enough for this rainbow behavior activism that's been going on for a good decade. So I think people are now like, all right, we've had enough. It's time to swing back to the normal way of things, and you know we're not just going to be berated about these types of things. It's not a thing we need to be told to. You know we're not going to be told what to do with this. Because that's what these people try to do. They try to tell you what you need to support, and the way that you need to do things, and we don't need to support this type of stuff. And we're going to keep supporting people like Sophie Cunningham, athletes who stand on the truth, and aren't going to go for lunacy. Um, and my whole point, let me just bring it in. I'll be all over the place. My whole point is that the WNBA is the way it is for a reason. It's about politics. It's about who's down with what. It's about it's about who your sister over really what you're really cutting out on the court. Your bedroom activities rule over the things that go on in the league. It's about skin color. It's about you know it's about the college that you went to. It isn't really about just balling out. You know what I'm saying? And they like to blackball players and push players out the league. They like to use the little bully tactics, and they've gotten away with it up until now. And that's really why they're mad. They can't do the things they were doing years ago when they're uh, in the darkness. We didn't really know what was going on. I heard about the Candace Wiggins thing. I remember it was a big story. But if Candace Wiggins was bigger, it would have really cut the league down. Now, because she was a good player, but she played, of course, in the pre CC days, so we couldn't really keep up. Like game to game, like, oh, they're freezing around, oh, they're doing this, like we can see now with Caitlin Clark. We can clearly every game, thousands of people who can call out the nonsense that's going on with the Indiana Fever and how they're trying to do Caitlin dirty. You know, she didn't have that back then, so they could blackball her out the league, and make her uninterested in being in the WNBA back then, and that's wrong. You know what I'm saying? You got the people that's claiming to be marginalizing other people based on things they don't like. They want to push people out if they don't fit fit their norms, and this is what you have going on. You have this type of league where you have a bunch of people with this marginalized, victim mindset, and they're doing all the bullying, but you can't. They don't want anyone talking about them, and that's always bullshit. Like I don't like that type of stuff. People trying to hide behind you know their status, protected status to get away with doing some fuckery to other people. It's just not it. Uh, you just got to do better. Uh, like I said, the WNBA, they got to stop this nonsense, this favoritism for people who you all see as protected status. It has to stop because it's gone overboard for a long time. Y'all been doing this before we knew what any before we knew what like trans people were, or before we knew all this different crazy sexuality stuff. Y'all was doing this stuff back then, and y'all gotta come to normal for a change. All right, you gotta leave this annoying stuff behind and actually become a league that knows how to profit from star players and promote good players, regardless of their sexual orientation. That's what y'all need to do. And nothing Sophie said should be considered abnormal. Uh, no matter how hard they try to make it seem, the average American is not for this type of stuff. Uh, and, you know, we don't want to see this stuff in our sports. And, you know, uh, and the owners of the WNBA, y'all going to go down if y'all want to keep playing this type of game. This ain't the era for y'all bringing y'all's, you know, crazy liberal mindset into sports. They're trying to do this in other sports. They try to force Pride Night and all this other stuff, and a lot of people just not feeling it. It's annoying. You keep waving these fucking multicolored rainbow flags, and purple and blue and all this other rainbow shit all over people's faces, and people are gonna be, they're gonna be they're eventually gonna have enough. It's like, damn, we gotta see this shit everywhere we go. Like, there's more of these flags than American flags. Like, why does the sexuality even get a flag for? Why are you getting a flag for? Someone make this make sense. I should get a flag for my blood type. I don't like. I should get a flag for, you know, being a black man with, a short afro. You should get a flag for being a black man with waves. Yeah, you should get a flag for being a Hispanic person with an Edgar haircut. You should get a flag for the different hair colors you wear. We should just get flags out for everything. And it's bullshit, man. And they've also seeded everything into. They put a lot of these agendas into different TV shows and everything like that. It's like these are supposed to be normal TV shows. Why do we have to deal with this? If you're gonna do this stuff, push it to the shows that is for that community over there. They watch their gay shit, and they're over there. Some drag queen shit or whatever. Go watch that show over there. I'm not gonna watch that shit. Once I see a title like that, I'm like, oh hell no. I'm not. What, are you crazy? I'm gonna be watching something for regular people, an action movie, so regular love story. Nothing. I'm not trying to come across two dudes getting it on. The gays is gonna get it's gonna be some girl on girl action. All right, it's gonna be girl on girl. All right, they're gonna do whatever. It's gonna have to be two cute girls. It can't be two, Amy Schumer looking chicks. It's gonna be two. It's gonna have to be two cute chicks. And it's gonna have to be, yeah, just some, you know, it's gonna have to be a movie that obviously is not for kids. Like, it's gotta be for like, a more mature audience. But it's just my point is just look, it's these owners too. These owners, they're on the bullshit. It's not just these players, and this is why the league is the way it is. And these owners, some of them got to get taken out of here. They're not making no money, and they don't seem to be interested in making no money, so they got to go. You're not trying to grow their league, you got to go, and they got to get people in here who understand what winning basketball looks like, what entertaining basketball looks like, who can do things for these women to make them, a lot more wealthier and a lot more known. Instead of playing in fucking these high school type gyms, get them in real fucking gyms, and that's only gonna happen if they're really growing the league by playing better. Instead of having animosity for Cleveland's fans, you can go and figure out how to fucking play in a game of basketball that can fucking grow the league, and help these other players, play in a way where they can, create some buzz about them. How about that? How about that? And when y'all figure that out, then things will work out. Until then, keep being fake mad about Caitlin Clark, and see how that works for you. All right, just making you're doing the opposite of what you need to be doing. You need to be looking at her, how she came to rise, and then trying to figure out how to, implement some things to help other star players get bigged up. And you can't demand people to like star players. If your star player doesn't have certain qualities, that's in their game and in their personality to get people to come to draw people in, then they don't have that, and it's not them. It's not in them. Then they're not even really a star player. Then it's just they're just a good player that puts on a team. And to be a star player, like the word star, you gotta have that effect. You gotta be able to pull people in, and that's why when they keep trying to push Asia and whoever else, it's like, it don't work like that. You can't just tell people what they need to be following. Like fans will get drawn into who they get drawn in. There's a reason why it's Caitlin Clark. She plays different from these other women and carries herself different from these other women. This is a true professional athlete. These other women are not really professionals. They're just putting on a uniform and then doing their lifestyle bullshit alongside that. You know, and trying to get attention on social media, doing bullshit. They're in high school. She's really out here doing the career shit. And this is also why it's so much nuts. It's too lopsided. You got one real player that's doing what she's supposed to do, and the rest of these women are just lollygagging around, bullshitting around. They're not serious about what they're supposed to be doing. They don't understand what they're really supposed to be playing for. You know, they think it's like a reality TV show. So, yeah, that's just my take on these women in the WNBA and the owners and how the owners are on their bullshit, which is why things are the way it is. And if y'all agree, y'all feel the way I'm feeling, uh, let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, all that good shit. I'm out.